Patrick, Melbourne, Australia. Good evening to you.
Good evening, Dr. M.
This afternoon here, and the last episode you did, you said the added advantage Bosch had was used to follow the sun with respect to delivery. And this episode, I'm following the moon. And okay, standard work. So I need to introduce you. And here we go. It happens. There.
Yep.
Thank you very much, Patrick. And this is a series that, I'm running, and you're on the 33rd episode, was irrespective of what method that you do, what process that you follow, tools that you apply, whether it's Lean Six Sigma, Toyota, production system, theory of constraint, but the entire thing was how do you support and sustain continuous improvement. So that's a series, and you have been my guest earlier, so you know the theme. And what we are going to talk, or what you are going to talk, is telling us about the ABC of organization transformation. Exactly like a caterpillar into a cocoon stage, and then you fly off as the butterfly. That's a transformation that I know, and I'm sure you make a distinction between a change and a transformation. So here we go introducing you. You have held various leadership positions in Bosch, regional president, vice president, 25 years in Bosch, Europe, UK, and Germany. You were also in China. You held the responsibility in China and Malaysia. There's a lot of experience, and you did share with us what we call the Bosch story in our previous episode on the same series. And then you went over to your academics, and all the experience you shared in Monash University, if I get the pronunciation right.
Yeah, that's correct. Monash University.
Monash University, the University Business School. And there you did taught them in the MBA program, and you helped a lot of postgraduate research work. And you were a catalyst for the interface between the academia and the industries.
That's right.
So that's a great service to the community. And I think it's the service to the community that got you into the present position which you're holding. You can share with us what's your responsibility in a brief, and that you started this year in June.
Yeah. So this is completely different to lean manufacturing and operations. It's basically the Catholic Diocese of Sale covers an area of 44,000 kilometers. It's actually bigger than Germany or Belgium, etc. So it's huge, but a very small population. And I look after supporting all of the buildings. And a lot of the buildings are in communities that are now much smaller than when they started. And other buildings are in new communities that are growing. So it's a bit of a contrast, but it's really a part-time job, and it's really helping as required. So it's a wide range of things, from getting small things fixed to supervising big projects. Very different, big contrast to what I'm usually used to do, but I'm enjoying it and it's a lot of fun. So
it's a great community service.
Exactly. Yeah, it is. It is.
So your specialty ranges from manufacturing and operations management, supply chain management, leadership, business process improvement, lean manufacturing operation, quality system improvement, coaching and mentoring. That's a real great knowledge base of skill sets. And thank you very much again for sharing your knowledge with me. I'm a little selfish on Dr. M's podcast. I learn first and then I share with people. So here we go, ABC of organization transformation, and you're on Dr. M's podcast. Hand it over to you, Patrick, all yours.
Thank you, Dr. M. Thank you. So what I'm going to share today is just go through a slide deck, a very simplified slide deck. And what I'm going to try and do is to try and share what I've learned about transformations through, and I will use quite a few examples of how I learned that. And I just happened to find a way of, making this knowledge fit a simple acronym ABC. And it implies that what I'm actually sharing is the basics, the fundamentals of transformation. It is not a methodology. I don't sell this on the consulting circuit. I simply share this in forums like this simply so that we can all benefit from the knowledge.
True.
So I'll start the slide deck now. So what I'm going to talk about today is transformations, and particularly business transformations, but I suppose you can also say it's a more universal transformation process. So as Dr. M mentioned, I've entitled it The ABC of Business Transformation. As Dr. M very nicely showed in that little slide about the caterpillar and the butterfly, it's always important to talk about the difference between transformation and change. And I'm emphasizing this here. That's my learning. Transformation is not change. And that's my first bullet point, that we can distinguish between change and transformation by the caterpillar to butterfly analogy. So the caterpillar transforms into a butterfly by first going into the cocoon, and then when it emerges, it has almost no relation to the previous state. But sometimes what we call change is a little bit like putting wings on the caterpillar. We just put on a couple of, those little wings that kids have for when they pretend to be fairies. We put them on. And look, from a distance, it looked like it could be a butterfly. But the reality is the caterpillar still crawls on leaves, does not fly. So what I'm talking about here is transformation is a process that removes links to the current state and via a cocooning process. And this is really important because even as Dr. M had in his introductory slide, he showed the cocoon in the process. And it yields a totally different entity, a different system, a different business, a different organization. And such is the challenge of any transformation. So the whole challenge is about the fact that even though sometimes we would like it to be a bit of a change, the fact is we have to let go of what it was before. It is a transformative, as the word says, a transformative process. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share a little bit my learning of transformation in terms of the different phases that I have found. And what I've done is I've summarized them into basically three groupings. So what I call the transformation, which is the ABC of transformation. So A stands for acceptance, B stands for budgeting, and C stands for commitment. And so what I'll do is over the next slides, I'll basically explain what I mean by each of these terms, the acceptance, budgeting, and commitment, and illustrate a little bit by some of my personal experiences in transformation processes. So the first, starting from A, acceptance. Whenever we talk about a transformation, a new target, something else, the easy part of acceptance is always about where we want to go, what we want to be. It's almost always exciting, better, great. So whenever we start with, for example, in the context, a lean transformation, we talk about lean, we talk about how it's going to change things, everything will be better, everybody will behave differently, and basically we get all excited about where we want to go, and what we want to be. It's normal and it's natural, and there's nothing wrong with that. But if this is all we accept,
Mhm.
in other words, we accept all the good bits,
Mhm.
it all loses its luster when the barriers, obstacles, and challenges arise.
Mhm.
Because what has happened is we never, there's a whole lot of other things that we haven't accepted.
Mhm.
And acceptance is not a feeling, it's a decision. So it's very important.
Mhm.
So what I've learned is acceptance has to be holistic.
Mhm.
So we have to accept, first of all, where we are now
Mhm.
and why it can no longer be acceptable.
Mhm.
This simple little sentence for me is a major factor into why a lot of lean transformations fail.
Mhm.
Because in lean transformation, we talk about where we are just like in generic terms,
Mhm.
and then we talk about the better place, and then we head off. And the problem is where we are today, a lot of people are very comfortable with it. They may not like it, they may not find it great, but they've adapted to it and they're comfortable with it.
Mhm.
And so what happens is every time we hit those barriers and obstacles, we always look back and say, well, it wasn't so bad where we were before. I mean, it had its problems, but it wasn't so bad.
Mhm.
And so a part of the acceptance is you have to explicitly accept why where you are today is no longer acceptable. Very, but for me, it's one of those big points. It isn't easy, but it's one of those critical factors.
Mhm.
It's also about accepting how we got to where we are and why it is a reality we must own.
Mhm.
So this is important. This is again another crucial point. You see, you have, whatever culture, mindset, practices, whatever you have today.
Mhm.
This is an outcome of all the things that happened in the past.
Mhm.
Perhaps as leaders, it wasn't our past, but it's a reality we have to own. We have to accept this is how we got to where we are.
Mhm.
And the reason again why is as we move into the budgeting phase,
Mhm.
we've got to look at and say, this is part of where we are.
Mhm.
And we have to overcome it. Because if you do not challenge mindsets, prejudices, cultures, whatever that have come from the past, if you
Mhm.
just by talking about lean doesn't mean that all of those mindset and cultures and prejudices and all these beliefs are suddenly going to disappear.
Mhm.
And they're not going to disappear. They've got even less chance of disappearing if we haven't even owned them. We just say, look, that was a past, nothing to do with us. Because then nothing will be done about it. But it doesn't mean they disappear and go away. It just means they're going to come up again. And the other part is accepting that the journey to the better place is never, ever easy.
Mhm.
It's a cocoon. It's dark. Yeah, there's going to be levels of darkness, level of being enclosed.
Mhm.
Again, when we talk about many times about lean transformations, when we talk about lean transformations, we always talk about it's just a whole lot of nice training and a couple of pilot projects and that's it. But we never realize that actually there are fundamental mindset changes. Leadership has to become different. Middle management has to be transformed. Everything that everybody does has to be transformed. And these changes will require a period of being in a cocoon because that is just the harsh reality. But if we don't accept that from the start, again, we put that to one side and say that's a negative thing, they will come, right? Yeah? The journey will be tough. But then if we haven't accepted it, we can't plan for it. We can't budget for it.
Mhm.
And this is another critical one.
Mhm.
Accepting that it is a journey with no turning back or shortcut.
Mhm.
it's always interesting that whenever we do things like a lean transformation, we have this view that let's go and, the classical example is somebody says, "Ooh, look, at the end of the day, management needs something quick. I tell you what, let's just jump straight away to Kanban, or let's jump straight away to just in time or whatever." Yeah, we take a shortcut. Or the other way is we start the process and then we say, look, for the moment, let's stop. We've just done a nice little bit of 5S. Let's leave it at that. Let's see what happens in the future. Yeah. The point is, this is a journey. You've got to accept that it is a journey. It isn't a simple step to the side or step to left or right. And very often people don't realize and don't accept it. So again, how many times have we seen lean transformations, and all we can show for it is a bit of a 5S program with a couple of pilot workshops and a few nice posters and the CEO doing a couple of Gemba walks, and that's it. And then after that, they said, well, we're happy with what we've got. It's making whatever it is better. So in actual fact, what has happened is effectively nothing will happen because we've actually turned back. Yeah? We've just turned back. Now, the reason why acceptance, as I went through in the detail, is crucial is that the next phase, which is budgeting, your budgeting is only as good as what your acceptance was. You can't budget for what you haven't accepted. It's just, that's the reality. Now, the first thing about budgeting that I want to put on the table is the easiest thing to do is to throw in the money. So hire consultants, hire a couple of CI, lean, whatever, facilitators, and put in a budget for a couple of offsite workshops, throw in a couple of seminars for all the crew, and we've got all the money on the table, and that's great. And yet, very few transformations fail because of insufficient funding. So in actual fact, throw in the money is the least of the issues of budgeting from my point of view. A true budget, what I'm sharing, has to consider the cost of leaders being present and active, meaning not by delegation, not by periodical reviews, not by allocating a few hours. It's always being present and always being active. And I know that immediately a lot of leaders say, but why? But that's the reality. So an example of what happened for me was another sharing a transformation, which was a fairly significant transformation, was basically exiting manufacturing in Australia and transferring it across the world, and with a loss of 400 people, including myself. And, in this period, which took the best part of almost 2 years, the key was we had to be present and active. I've also been involved in lean transformation. And again, the leader says, well, look, I've got a whole lot of other things to do. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to appoint a 2IC to do this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to do a little bit of a 3-monthly periodical review, or I'm going to allocate 6 to 8 hours a week for the lean transformation. There's no point. This is a process that requires leadership, presence, active leadership, any transformation. So it's really about putting it on the table. A lot of people talk about being active and present, but don't budget for it. They don't change anything about what they do. They don't even consider what it means. How many times have we heard of transformations failing? The budget also has to consider the emotional cost on the organization and what will be required to support it. And this is often what I found to be the biggest gap. And it is often too late when you see it appear, because you see the emotional cost, the emotional cost meter starts ticking over the minute you've announced your transformation. The problem is that sometimes the emotions are under the surface. They're below, but they'll come out. They don't disappear. So to give an example, in our manufacturing exit, we spent a huge amount of effort on that. And we had some amazing HR colleagues that did the work, but we also considered communication. So we actually worked with some communication experts. And the point is that often with communication, what you communicate, how you communicate, takes into account the emotions. And if you anticipate the emotions, it changes. So for example, for us, before we made the announcement of the exit, we took all of the shop floor and middle management and senior management team and took them away for about 8 hours. Took them offline for 8 hours, went through what's going to happen, and made them the people to help with the announcement and the impact of the announcement. So I can only emphasize again that when you find the emotional cost, if you haven't budgeted for it, when you see it appear, it's probably too late. The emotions have overflowed. You haven't anticipated them. There's not much really you can do. The other cost to budget is the cost of not doing certain things. You see, you can't have business as usual when you're in a cocoon, and there is a cost to it. So you have to accept that you might have to say, well, in a lead transformation, the CEO, because they're allowing a certain amount of time for them to be present and active, perhaps the amount of business development we can do, the amount of relationship management we can do, etc., is not going to happen. There's no magic, and very often businesses just assume everything's going to happen. Well, the fact is it can't, and you have to budget for it. And this is really counterintuitive, because you say, well, not doing it is not an option. Great, you want a transformation. On the other hand, if you budget for the cost, you might find that it may not be as crucial and as critical as what you think. The cost of mistakes, errors of judgment, unknowns. So this is a journey into uncharted territory, and these journeys very rarely go smoothly. Again, it's about budgeting. It sounds counterintuitive that, why would you budget for mistakes, errors of judgment, unknowns? Because, but if you're transforming an organization, you're changing the state from the caterpillar state to the butterfly state. In a cocoon, a whole lot of things can happen. A whole lot of things can go wrong. And in fact, because you're really transforming, the best way of you knowing is there are certain things you didn't know. And it's not a big problem. If you accept that you didn't know, but you've budgeted for it, you've taken it into account. And, in our manufacturing exit, we accepted that there would be times when we would have industrial relations issues. We may have quality issues. We may have things that we assumed that were wrong. And we budgeted for it. A lot of the budget was not just dollars, but also about simply how would we communicate and how would we establish a different process. And, just as an aside, one of the things that we communicated a lot was that we as leaders are not perfect. This is uncharted territory. Let's accept uncharted territory. And what that does is it actually allows you to move forward, even though you've made mistakes. But if you don't consider, if you think everything is going to be smooth, there's never going to be errors of judgment, there's never going to be mistakes. Every time it happens, not only does it come up with a cost, and the cost can be dollars, emotion, hours, time, credibility even, but if you haven't budgeted for it, you will never be able to, well, it will happen and it'll kill you. So the next C is, and this one, a lot of people think, well, that should be the easy one because we are all committed. And all leaders believe, I believe that too, that we are committed. But do we really know what commitment looks like? Because, you know, for years, we've been brought up in a system where I'm committed. And because I'm committed, and here commitment means I work all the extra hours, I do the extra magic tricks, and I make sure that I look good, whatever, I'm committed. And therefore, that's got me to where we are. So therefore, I believe that that's what commitment is. And unfortunately, that is not really what commitment is. See, what I learned is that committing to a transformation, this is what it includes. So being there from beginning to end, always present. This means accepting that career milestones, opportunities, big bonuses will be sacrificed. Right? So, example, lean transformation. There is a process where you know, we're changing the culture, we're doing this, we're doing that. And I won't be able to get my big bonus for massive first-time cost slashing. I won't be able to get that. In fact, I may need to wear some cost increases because I have to put in more resources, change processes, have transition, etc. Another key about it is to accept that if I'm leading a lean transformation, if somebody says to me, oh, there's a great chance for a promotion to another division or to another role, basically, if I want to lead this transformation, if I'm committed, that's the price of commitment. You see, whenever we talk about commitment, we always talk about everything that is good. If that was so easy, everybody would be true. We wouldn't need a word called commitment because everybody would be. So there would be nothing to distinguish commitment from involvement, from being a bit engaged, from being favorable, from being supportive. So commitment really has an element of, a strong element, in my opinion, of sacrifice. And not many people like that. Commitment is also about understanding that tough decisions will be required and understanding the implications of making them. So there will be times when certain people are just not going to make it. They're not going to cut it. You have to make these decisions. There will be times when certain planned growth that we require doesn't fit, or going for certain products doesn't fit. They have to be made. They are never easy. And most of all, in commitment, is it's understanding the implications of making them. So again, there could be implications on the self. But this is what commitment is. Commitment is not about everything is going to be smooth, fine, and everybody's going to be happy in the end. It cannot be. And how many times have we seen with lean transformations that, you know, suddenly leadership says, look, we haven't got time for this, not prepared for that, not willing to accept this, not willing to accept that. That's where it fails, Commitment is also acknowledging that the reality of mistakes, errors of judgment, setbacks, and that blame will not work. This is really a very powerful statement, and it's something we learned in our manufacturing exit. There were errors of judgment. I made fairly significant errors of judgment, and others made significant errors of judgment. And normally, in normal process, what we say is we start to blame. Oh, look, that's your claim. You've got to live with this. You've got to deal with that. What happens is that suddenly you stop the lean transformation. You stop whatever transform, because now the process is focused on blame. Who is to blame? Who counter defends? Who makes a counter attack? Who does this? Yeah. So what's happening is, if you're committed to the end result, so for example, once you're in that cocoon, you can't say, well, actually, you know, nature is not very fair in this respect. You know, it should make the cocoon smoother or easier and whatever. There's no point blaming. You have to move forward, but you have to acknowledge that up front. The process of commitment is defining what commitment is up front. Yeah? Accepting that the final state is the only reference point. And looking back or sideways is unacceptable, especially when we confront challenges and obstacles. But this is really another crucial thing about commitment. If you are committed to a lean transformation, that is the only objective. So if you think about it, you accepted that you had to go there, you budgeted to get there, but now you have to be committed to get there. You can't keep saying, look, you know, it's getting a little bit too hard now. Maybe we can turn back. And in the analogy of the caterpillar and the butterfly, what often happens is people say, well, look, you know, why don't we just get some cardboard wings, whack it on the caterpillar, and that's it. Yeah. So what happens now is basically, and it's because everybody lost sight of the fact that the only show in town is to become a butterfly. There is nothing else. And again, you know, it sounds like a reasonable thing, but how many times have you seen lean transformations, you know, where people stated wonderful statements of commitment? You saw them on posters from the, you know, the CEO and their executive we are committed to a lean transformation. But along the way, a lot of the actions say that, you know, where we are today has got some good points as well. So let's have a bit of a each way bet. So commitment is about the final state is the only reference point, and you can't keep looking back or sideways. And most of all, you can't keep looking back when you confront challenges, because if at the first challenge you're looking back and saying, well, look, maybe what we used to do wasn't so bad after all, or well, you know, maybe we can do, instead of you know, we can do a sort of a minor lean or a little bit of this and a little bit of that. Right? Again, it's commitment. It's not a feeling. It's not a just, you know, words. It's an active decision that considers everything, the implications, what will happen and what will not happen. Yeah. And this is something that a lot of you may have read, From Good to Great by Jim Collins. And in there, he speaks about the Stockdale Paradox. And so retain faith that you will prevail in the end, regardless of difficulties, and at the same time, confront the most brutal facts of your current reality, whatever they may be. Yeah. So, From Good to Great by Jim Collins. Now, a lot of people read this and see in it something like, you know, a nice set of words, that are very pleasant and, you know, it generates feelings. But if you read in Good to Great about Stockdale and what it was about, it was not about just feeling. A comment, you know, the optimists kept thinking it's going to get better next week, next month, next year, and then they all basically died because they were hoping for something better. It's not a feeling. It's a fundamental, strong decision that has a clear anchoring into the reality. This is a brutal fact. This is where we are. We're going to go on a long journey. It's going to be tough, but we have to prevail in the end. We have to prevail in the end. And that's why I said, when you talk about the final state is the only reference point. Not, maybe it could, maybe we might get we might not need to do it. Maybe we can avoid it. So this is, you know, the process of transformation. And what I think I would do now is I would unshare and we can have a few questions. And then I've got a final slide, which is just simply some conclusions that I put in. But I think at this stage, we should simply now just go into some questions and answers and comments. Yeah?
No, there's, well, I'm in total sync with what you said, and I always believed in the leap of faith that is required. And just a previous episode, the 32nd episode I did with Art Byrne, just before that, he also speaks of the art of leap of faith. That's required, but then it's as you rightly said, it has to be anchored from time to time. It's a journey. I like that. And the whole problem, I mean, in my words, is that certain words have become so familiar, like transformation, change, commitment, etc. We really think that we know what it is. Unfortunately, we don't, because we have a total. Each of us would have a different dictionary within us, which would interpret each of these terminologies. So, going through what you said of acceptance and the leadership at whatever position communicates, they communicate in the language and they precisely tell them exactly what they mean by all these words that they're using. They're not shallow words, they mean it. And you rightly said, what's the number of the calendar date, as Jeff Hoslow would also say the same thing, that how much time and is the leadership going to spend over there with all of them and not making some statement at some point of time and then just vanishing. So I like all of that. And the word commitment. Then I got this, which I say this from my perspective. A commitment sometimes is forced. You are committed because you have no other option. That's exactly what you're driving at. You have no other option but to change. I like that part of it. Involvement has got a little bit of emotional content in that, which commitment should have, the emotional content. Like, for example, a nurse in a hospital looking after the pediatric care, looks after the kid. She's committed to her work. It's 9 to 5, and she looks at 5 o'clock and says, when is the next nurse coming? Or maybe the dosage has to be given at a certain point of time. She does it. We're not saying that she doesn't do it. She does it. But look at the mother. She's totally involved. She will chase the nurse to say that, look, when are you giving my child her medicine? The nurse will turn around and say, look, another half an hour. He says, no, look at the time. It is 5 minutes late. Now, mother is involved. Now, the nurse says, you know, I'm going off at 5 o'clock. Are you sure Sister Patricia is going to come? He says, You know, that's a difference that I find between involvement. I mean, I'm sure when you said commitment, the involvement part of the emotional content is there. But I always look at the leadership involvement, the employees' involvement, everybody's involvement. And for that, I agree with everything that you said about the ABC. There has to be a proper communication and the budgeting for everything that you're going to anticipate, and contingency plan for that. Like when you go out for sailing, when you go out for driving, you have everything planned out. You even check the weather conditions, etc. But in this journey of transformation, probably in organization, there are certain things that you can anticipate, some you cannot anticipate. But then you make a contingency plan. That's the way I like this, and I like the concept of transformation that you said. There's no going back. Once you're in the cocoon stage, you have to make a deliberate decision that you have to get into the cocoon state. And then once you do that, you can never get back into where you were before. It's not, I'm not asking you questions. I just gave my feelings on that. I hope it's appropriate. I don't know.
No, it is absolutely appropriate, Dr. Em. And I think this is, you see, what we're talking about here is really why so many lean transformations, CI transformations, and a whole lot of other business transformations fail. So I think, you spoke a lot about commitment. And this is why I started with my slide, because look, when we were going through this manufacturing exit, and we were working with some very good professionals. One of their questions, one of the points was made was, do you know what commitment means? And their point was, don't start with a nice analogy about, the bacon and the egg, So the chicken gives an egg, so that's involvement. The pig gives half a leg to get the bacon, and that's commitment. Look, yes, it's true, it's a nice analogy, but here we've got to go away from just the sentimental aspect of commitment, but understand it to be a decision. And that's why I like so much the Stockdale Paradox, because when you read what it means, it's a decision, and it's a decision with wide open eyes, never believing that the sky is going to be blue, the seas are going to be smooth, the wind is going to be just right, and you will always find your direction. The fact is, it isn't like that. It will not be like that. And it will be moments of darkness, moments that you didn't think you would need to confront. And the problem I think we have in modern leadership is too many leaders believe that they have to be in control. So whenever you face something that you cannot control, you basically can't do anything about it. What do you do when you have something that you cannot control? You basically either turn back, turn sideways, look around, or you totally pretend it didn't happen. And it's because the belief of we have to be in control. So when we use the analogy of the cocoon, the minute that caterpillar has got itself into a cocoon, it can't influence how long the cocoon will be. It can't say, well, look, I've been in here now 4 days. I think that's enough. There's a whole lot of things that can happen that are out of the control. Commitment, and that's the Stockdale Paradox, is saying, well, I knew it was going to have a whole lot of things that I didn't expect. But you know how counterintuitive it is for many leaders who believe that their job is to control. I am in control. I control and influence everything and anything. Of course, it's actually absurd to claim that, because if we have this power as leaders, We can control everything, the world, the weather, climate, global economies. But the thing is, absurd as it is, that's what the premise. So that's why it's such a difficult process. And it's not one, you can't decide you're committed halfway through the transformation. And you can't discover commitment halfway through the transformation. You've got to know it and make the decision up front. Yeah.
You know, I like this, what you said about leaders being in control. It also reminds me that when we were parenting our kids, we always thought, or the parents always thought, oh, sorry, the children always thought that the parents had a solution for everything. And I moved up from a supervisor level to the director's level. And at times I was caught as a director that I always fell into a trap that I should give a solution for something. You know, that people are looking to me for a solution. And as I grew up and as I kept understanding it, that it was not, I mean, if I can get rid of my telling culture, do this, do that, and then the children and the colleagues look onto you that we'll wait for him to direct and tell, and then they said, okay, now this is the problem, you give me the solution. Now, I understood, and as I read and meeting people like you, that it's very often that you don't have a solution, and there's nothing wrong in you going and saying that, look, let's talk it together and probably be vulnerable enough to say that I'm not in control and I need a solution from you all. Let's sit together, let's get the expert around and let's talk about it. Instead of saying that, you know, well, they said go left, right, or say it doesn't happen. What's your take on that?
Well, it's a little bit about, you know, when you compare the vision of classical leadership, yeah, I wouldn't use the term old school, it's just classical. So the vision of classical leadership was, if left to their own devices, people wouldn't know what to do, wouldn't know how to do it, wouldn't know how to solve a problem. And this is why we pay you, manager, executive, CEO, COO, to fix this problem. So therefore you're paid because everybody else doesn't know. That's the classical view of management and leadership. My view of leadership is a little bit of an interesting little analogy, and it is, one day you're a senior manager, and the next day you've been promoted to executive. Yeah, so you leave on Friday. Yeah, everybody has been announced in advance. On Monday you arrive, you're now the COO. Do you believe that in that over that weekend, in that 24-hour period, you were suddenly downloaded a whole lot of amazing powers and skills and competencies so that you can now answer the questions you used to ask of your predecessor? Yeah? And the answer, and it is absurd as that. It is as absurd as that. But this is a problem that, you know, and so for me, whenever I have to keep reminding myself of that, because when you confront that, you realize, okay, therefore, it's absurd that I should know everything. And often the answer is a little bit, I would say, you could look at the answer or where's the truth this way. You could say to yourself, you know, if we believe in the absurdity of somebody knowing everything about what needs to be done, if we believe in this, does this imply that only one person has all intellectual faculties? And therefore, by logical deduction, I must be stupid. Now, the funny thing about it is that so often in organizations, that is exactly what happens. People tell you, look, it's better to act stupid than to act smart. Just play stupid. Just say, you tell me, boss. Right? And that's what happens. And the boss says, I know he's not stupid, but I'm the boss. And it's actually very comfortable if I tell him whatever I think it should be, often knowing it isn't right, or often knowing I haven't got a clue myself, but I tell him. And guess what happens? The person who asks a question probably got a dumb answer, a stupid answer, an average answer, a weak answer, probably says, oh yeah, thank you, boss. That was such an enlightening comment. And after a while, what we have is a process of lies. It's one big lie. I kid myself that I know something because I'm the boss. I must know something because everybody else tells me. And the other person says, look, I tell myself I'm stupid because it's a lot more convenient to be told what to do. And the biggest lie of the lot is all of this nonsense, you know, weak answers, dumb acceptance. The biggest myth out of it, the biggest lie, is that we're making the company better. It can't be. The company is becoming mediocre as we go through, and this is this is something that we have to confront in these sort of confronting and challenging words, because that's the problem. Yeah, that's the problem. Believing that somebody else knows the answer to a question that we don't want to ask ourselves, or that we would rather not take responsibility for. It's a very, very dangerous path to mediocrity, that one.
That's great. That's a lot of input for me, and there's a lot of thoughts that is running in my, you know, from Melbourne to Mumbai, I get it directly here. There's nothing to interfere, so it goes right into my. So let's sum up your take now, so that we can have 2 minutes more after we look at the summary.
Yeah. So if we look at, sorry, come to the conclusions. So the first conclusion is there are no easy paths to in transformation. Most get them, but in the end, because they still try looking for the easiest bit or whatever, they always end up with just a bit of a change. We set out for a transformation. We all know what it involves, but in the end, we end up thinking, look, it's a lot easier if we put some cardboard wings on the caterpillar and call it a butterfly. Yeah? So transformation is a process, a journey. It's not a policy or a directive. The problem we have is that, and it's just what we were just talking about before, you know, the boss has the answer. So if a boss says we're going to do a lean transformation, then we're going to do a lean transformation. So it becomes a directive instead of being a true journey, a true process. So like any journey or process, success depends on how we prepare, the acceptance of everything it entails, and an unwavering commitment to the outcome, to the destination. It's a lot of what we discussed about, where we put a lot of emphasis on commitment. But ultimately, you see, transformation is a conscious choice, a definitive decision, and it's not something we can get done to or something we can go along with. And I use the term here, get done to. So very often organizations will simply hire a bunch of consultants to do a lean transformation to them. It's almost like saying, you know, the caterpillar says, look, I'll hire somebody else to go into the cocoon part. And then suddenly I'll become a butterfly without having to go through the cocoon. Now, absurd as it is, that's what a lot of people do. So that's the conclusions. I'll send the slide deck to you separately so that if anybody asks for it or however you want to publish it with the video, just so people, if anybody wants it as a sort of a memory.
Sure, I'll do it. And the final takeaway is that let's give the caterpillar the real wings and not the cardboard wings, right?
Well, actually, Dr. M, it's about the caterpillar has to become a butterfly. So in actual fact, the butterfly is a different entity and a different creature to the caterpillar. Yeah. The minute we talk about giving a caterpillar wings, a lot of people will come up with very elaborate wings. And this is, look, think about lean transformation. Where suddenly people have to really fundamentally change. And instead they said, now look, what we're going to do is we're going to continue to do what we've always done, right? But we're just going to put in a bit of Kanban, and we're going to do a couple of JIT contracts. And oh yeah, we did a little bit of 5S down the line in the corner here. And so it's all about putting wings on a caterpillar. And sometimes we can afford some really lifelike, realistic wings, but we're not giving wings to a caterpillar. The caterpillar disappears and becomes a butterfly. And in between, there is a cocoon. And once you're in the cocoon, there is no turning back. There isn't, let me pop out of the cocoon halfway through and say, look, let me see, I'm half a butterfly. It doesn't work that way. There is never half a butterfly.
I love this analogy of putting the wings on the caterpillar, but the caterpillar will still have to feed on the leaves, right?
The caterpillar, by definition, crawls on leaves. In fact, sometimes you make its life harder by putting wings on it.
Thanks a lot for that session, and see you soon.
Thank you, Dr. M.
Thanks a lot, Patrick. Thanks a lot.